Okay, so this is a test run, children, for seeing A, if I can make a video at home at my kitchen table, and B, if I can successfully upload it to the YouTube channel so that you guys can view this while we're all learning at home. Before we start new lessons, which we are going to do, I wanted to review real quick the factoring methods because I'm pretty sure none of you have thought about this over the last week. I know until I had to make lessons, I didn't really think about it either. But if you remember, we had 3 factoring methods. And the first one, the easy one, is straight to a diamond problem, and that's when the leading coefficient is 1. So if we had something like x squared minus 3x plus 2, we would go straight to the diamond. The 2, the constant at the end, goes in the top of the diamond. The coefficient on x in the middle goes in the bottom. And then we didn't know what 2 numbers multiply to 2 and add to -3. Well, if they add to be negative but multiply to be positive, we know that they're both going to be negative, and the only 2 numbers that make any sense are -2 and -1. And just like before, you can't leave your answer in the diamond, so make sure you write the factors. So we have x minus 2 and x minus 1. So that's the first easy type of factoring. The second type that we talked about was difference of squares. And this happens when we've got only 2 terms and that they're both perfect squares. So if we look at the example I wrote down, it's 4x squared minus 49. So we know that 4 is a perfect square, x squared is a perfect square, and so is 49. So when we do difference of squares, we take the square root of the first term. Well, the square root of 4x squared is 2x. We take the square root of the second term, and the square root of 49 is 7. And then we're going to have 2 factors. The square root of the first term is listed first in both. One is plus and one is minus. And the square root of the second term is listed second always. And I know I said it 8 million times, but remember that you can multiply these back out and check that your answer is correct. Okay, the last type of factoring that we did, and the reason that I'm reviewing these is because you have to be able to do them for our new lesson that we're going to start. You have to be able to factor. The harder diamond problem was when our leading coefficient wasn't 1. So if we look at the example that I have, we've got 3x squared minus 14x minus 5. Well, 3 is obviously not 1. So we take this leading coefficient and we multiply it by our constant. And that's what goes in our diamond. And remember, we make a bigger diamond here because we're going to need fractions. So 3 times -5 is -15. The constant, or I'm sorry, the coefficient on x still needs to go in the bottom. And we need 2 numbers that multiply to -15 but add to -14. Well, it's going to be -15 and +1. And if you notice, I wrote them small, and the reason is, in these harder diamond problems, remember that we have to make these into fractions. And what we divide by is the coefficient on the x squared term, that guy out front that we multiplied in. We multiplied it in, so we have to bring it back out. And then we're going to simplify our fractions as we bring them over into our factors. So x 15 over 3, well, that reduces to 5, so it becomes x minus 5. And the fraction 1/3 does not reduce. So we have x plus 1/3. But Ms. Ball said we can't leave fractions in our answer, so this is when we take that denominator and we bring it out in front of the x. So our x minus 5 factor is totally fine, but this x plus 1/3 is going to become 3x plus 1. So that is our 3 methods of factoring. The only thing I didn't talk about on here was looking for greatest common factor. So remember that you can, if everything is divisible by a factor, a lot of times you're going to be able to factor it out front and then use the easier diamond problem. And I'll talk about that a little bit in our notes for day 70. But I'm going to upload this paper with these 3 examples on it so that you have those 3 to work off of as you're starting to do the practice problems yourself.